Spirit Walker, chapter 13, from Wolf's viewpoint at the start. Wolf couldn't find tall tailors, but he knew that he had to keep trying. Once, he'd caught the scent in a tangle of beech saplings where his pack-brother had dug a den, but then he'd lost it again. The scent was chewed up with that of boar scat, and with the stink of the badness that haunted the forest, and a troubling new smell, the smell of demon. Wolf had learnt that smell when he was a cub. The memory was very bad. Once more he cast about, but in vain, and always the fear snapped at his hind paws. The Thunderer was angry with him for leaving the mountain. Wolf felt it in his fur and in the tingling of his pads. It was coming after him. Soon it would attack. The up had gone very dark, and the breath of the Thunderer was stirring the trees. Sounds were becoming louder, smells sharper, as they always did when it began to growl. At last, Wolf caught the scent of his pack-brother. He could have howled for joy. Filled with new purpose, he ran on, and the prey ran with him, desperate to escape, and sensing that Wolf wasn't hunting them. A beaver slid off a riverbank and swam for its den. A red deer doe raced with her fawn for the safety of the thickets. Suddenly the Thunderer vented its fury. The wet burst upon the forest, flattening bracken and bending trees like grass. A deafening crash, and down from the up came the bright beast that bites hot, missing Wolf by a pounce, and hitting a pine tree instead. The tree screamed. The bright beast swallowed it whole. Wolf swerved, but one of the bright beast's cubs fell in front of him and bit him on the forepaw. With a yelp he leapt high, then raced away with the stink of the dying tree in his nose. He felt as frightened as a cub. He wanted his mother. He wanted tall tailors. He was all alone and very, very scared. Renn was all alone in the forest and getting scared. She'd slipped away from the camp 2 days before and still hadn't found Torak. Twice she'd heard the demented shrieks of the sick echoing through the trees, and once she'd caught a rustling overhead. It felt as if every bush, every tree concealed a Tokaroth. And now the storm was coming. The world spirit was angry. Through a gap in the branches she saw a heavy bank of wolf-grey cloud and heard a rumble of thunder. She was already within striking range. She must take cover. The valley she was crossing had granite crags on its eastern side, and she saw some promising dots of darkness which might be caves. She ran, snatching up sticks of firewood as she went. The storm burst with appalling suddenness. The world spirit hammered at the clouds, splitting them open to let loose the rain, hurling dazzling arrows of lightning upon the forest. In the distance, Renn caught the flare of a tree going up in flames. If she wasn't careful, she'd be next. At last she found a cave, but wet as she was, she hung back. A cave can be a shelter or a death trap, so she checked for signs of bear or boar and that the roof was high enough, otherwise the lightning might find its way down a crack and through her head. When she was sure it was safe, she plunged in. She was shaking with cold and desperate for a fire, but first she saw to her bow. Pulling it out of its salmon skin wrapping, she hung it on a tree root jutting from the cave wall. After that she propped up her arrows to dry, so that they wouldn't warp. Then she woke up a fire. Out in the forest, the storm raged. Renn wondered where Torak was and if he'd found shelter. Tracking him from the Raven camp had not been easy, and to begin with she'd had to guess. She'd reasoned that he'd stayed off the main clan trails, which left a number of choices. Bears and other hunters tend to stay down by the rivers where the prey comes to drink, which means that elk and deer trails are higher up the slopes. After what had happened last autumn, Renn had guessed that Torak would want to avoid bears, which meant he probably would have taken the prey trails. She'd been proven right when she'd found his shelter, but it had given her a shock to see it crushed beneath an ash tree. A huge relief to find no body inside, and she'd quickly located the remains of the new shelter beside it. She had known it was his because he made his fires in a star pattern, which wasn't the Raven way. Next morning, she'd lost the trail again. A boar had obliterated the tracks. The fire spat, jolting her back to the present. Her wound hand throbbed. As she huddled closer to the flames, she pictured the Tokarok's sharp brown teeth, heard again that malevolent hiss. "Something to eat," she said to chase away the thought. Her pack contained dried elk meat, smoked salmon cakes from the racks, and salmon, although in a fit of mischief she hadn't taken fresh salmon cakes, but had raided Sayan's private store, a neat stack of cakes packed into a length of dried auroch gut. She took one, broke off a bit for the clan guardian, then ate the rest. It was from last summer's catch, but still good. It reminded her sharply of the clan. Beside her lay the wickerwork quiver that Oslak had taught her to make. On 2 fingers of her left hand were the leather finger guards that Vedna had sewn. Her right forearm bore the wrist guard of polished green slate which Finkedin had made for her when he taught her to shoot. She rarely took it off, and her brother had often teased her about that. Her brother. He had died the previous winter. It hurt to think of him. To cheer herself up, she took out the little grouse bone whistle that Torak had given her the previous autumn. It didn't make any sound that she could hear, but she always kept it with her. Wolf seemed to hear it well enough, and once she'd used it to summon him, and it had saved her life. Now she gave it a tentative blow. Nothing happened. Of course, she hadn't expected that it would. Wolf was far away on the mountain. Feeling lonely, she unrolled her sleeping sack and curled up by the fire. She awoke to the prickling certainty that she was not alone. The storm had passed, but the rain was still coming down in torrents, gurgling through secret channels in the cave walls. The fire had sunk to a smouldering glow. Beyond it, in the dark at the mouth of the cave, something was watching her. She struggled upright and groped for her axe. The thing in the cave mouth was big, too big for a Tokaroth. A lynx? A bear? But if it was a bear, she would hear it breathing, and it wouldn't stay outside. Somehow that didn't make her feel any better. "Who's there?" she said. She sensed rather than heard the creature come forwards. Whatever it was, it moved as silently as breath. Then she saw the gleam of eyes. She cried out. The creature backed away. Then it edged once more into the light. Renn gasped. It was a wolf, a big one, with a heavy coat of sodden grey fur. Its head was lowered to catch her scent, and it didn't look threatening or afraid, just wary. Renn took in the thick mantle of black fur across its shoulders, the great amber eyes. Those eyes. It couldn't be. Slowly she put down her axe. "Wolf?"